My name is Lisa Kuffel. My father left me on a beach when I was 12 years old. Okay, it's important for me to tell you that that was not the first thing that my father chose to do with me. It was nearly the last thing he tried to do with me. He was at his wit's end. Before I had trouble with drug addiction, which heroin was my drug of choice, I had behavioral problems that he did not understand. Okay, so he left me on the beach when I was 12 years old, and I quickly got caught up in the life of crime to support myself. I was living on the streets. I was living on the beach, actually, in Santa Cruz, and I lived the way pretty much most homeless people do, sleeping in the alley, eating out of garbage cans. And I went from there to becoming a heroin addict. I started using drugs, and I became a heroin addict. I went to state prison. I got busted for some crimes. Burglary was one of them. And I went to state prison, and after that I was in and out of prison all through the 80s on just parole violations because I wouldn't report. I would just come out and I would use drugs. I pretty much used drugs when I was in prison, and I used drugs when I was out of prison. Okay, so until eventually one day, my addiction got so strong in me, and so I decided that I was going to rob banks. I met a person at my connection's house, and he was a bank robber, and he showed me what to do. And I robbed banks for quite a while, many banks, and with a gun. And I never intended to hurt anyone. In fact, all they would have had to do was tell me that no, they couldn't have the money, and I would have thanked them and walked away. My intentions were never to hurt anybody. But they're instructed to give you the money and do not not to obstruct your departure. So it was very easy. So when I finally got arrested and for bank robbery, I went to federal court, and they gave me a 53-year prison term. They gave me 8 years for my bank robberies, and they gave me what is called a mandatory minimum 45 years because they said I had a gun when I went to do it. So that was in 1991 I was sentenced, so I got arrested in 1990. So the first 10, 12 years I was in federal prison, I kept using drugs. And I figured that I was here, and I was here for the rest of my life, and I was probably going to die here in prison. And so I figured, why not? The judge sentenced me to prison, and I was on that side of the fence, and I figured as long as I was in the right place, I could do what I wanted to do. So around 2002, I decided I was done. I just started feeling so guilty and shameful about the lifestyle I was still living that I just decided I was going to quit. And so since 2002, I changed my life around in prison. I started going to the classes. I started going to drug programs. I started taking computer classes. I worked for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office over computer input and data for 15 years. I worked as a shipping and receiving clerk in the commissary there. And I worked there for 12 years. And fast forward to like 2018, the Congress passed a bill called the First Step Act. And it was the first step that they had actually taken to reform prison. And one of the things that was reformed was they said that was unconstitutional, what they did to me, how they sentenced me. So I started writing every lawyer, law student, advocacy agency I could find to help me get out of prison. And although I was getting a lot of support and sympathy and people saying they were going to help me, things weren't going through, and I just figured that it was wrong of me to expect anybody, especially people I didn't know, and especially for the fact that I had no money to pay them, for them to want to help me to get out of prison. And so I came up to the conclusion that if I wanted to get out of prison, I would have to get myself out. I got myself in, I would have to get myself out. So I quit my good paying job at the commissary and I went to work in the law library, and I learned a little bit about the federal law. And I learned how to file my own paperwork. And so I filed what is called a motion to petition the judge to see if he'd let me out of prison. And so I did, and he promptly denied me. So it was like maybe 2 or 3 months later, I kept working on my case, and the weakest point I had was, I had good points. I had a very good prison record the second half of my term that showed I turned my life around, and I made drastic decisions, not only in the way I behaved, but in my heart and in my spirit. And so I kept working on the weakest part of my motion was my parole plans. I had nowhere to go. I had wrote in the paperwork that I was going to look for some kind of transitional living place because I had been in prison 30 years. I hadn't even talked on a cell phone ever. I've never been on the internet. I never had a bank account. I never filed for a W-2 form. I never filed for income taxes. I pretty sure that the only time I was ever inside a bank was when I went to rob it. So I knew I needed help, and through word of mouth, my friend had told me, well, I know of this place called Hope Harbor. It's in Lodi. And when she said the words Hope Harbor, I felt this little shimmer in my belly, and I said, this is where I need to be. This is right where I needed to be. I didn't want to be anywhere else. So I got in touch with the people at Hope Harbor, the Corps there, and I guess my case fell towards Kiana Hackett, who is the case manager for the women's side at the Salvation Army. And she wrote a letter to the judge. She said that not only would they want to be the organization that helped me get started stand on my feet. They wanted to help me get reacclimated, that if the judge was to grant my release, that my every need would be met. I would be fed, I would be clothed, I would have a roof over my head. They would give me the counseling, the time, and the knowledge on how to rebuild my life and start at baby steps. And they wanted to be the place, she wanted to be the place to transition me into the free world. So I thought, they don't even know me. Do I need to put in an application? Because they already accepted me. They said that they had a bed immediately for me whenever the judge released me and for how long I wanted. So I resubmitted my paperwork along with the letter of recommendation from Kiana, and the rest is history. The judge granted my release. I still had, off the 53-year prison term, I still had 16 years left of my prison term. So I should be, by all rights, I should still be in the same prison cell I had occupied for the past 31 years. And not only by the grace of God and the heart of Kiana and the knowledge of other powers to be here at the Salvation Army, I wouldn't be here. So now I'm here. I'm going through what they call a transitional living. I'm in a culinary arts program that is going to teach me a life skill, how to cook, and all about food, how to handle it. I just passed a Serve Safe test at a managerial level, so I'm already skilled enough to go out and get a job, in any restaurant at a manager's level, and now I'm learning how to cook to back that up. So do I know whether I'm going to cook or not? Well, I'll be in that field somehow, some way. The doors will open for me. But I know that when the intentions of my heart turn pure, the doors open for me, and that's where I'm at today.